Oh my God. As I'm starting this, Angel Jackson has been selected to the WNBA draft. So we are changing the last segment, but we'll kick it off with Walker Harris, who is the secret weapon for the North Carolina Central Eagles in 2024. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/locked on to make every moment more. And if you put down a $5 bet, win or lose, you get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed if you're new to FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. This is the type of moment that we live for, impromptu, just because it just happened. I had my television on, and we'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Angel Jackson, who is drafted in the WNBA draft with the final pick. Okay, this is very impromptu. This was not the plan, but we will move segment 3 on to tomorrow or the day after. In segment 2, we have everything is scheduled. HBCU Gymnastics has arrived. Kyrstin Johnson, and Morgan Price both have great days at the USA Gymnastics Collegiate National Championships. And we kick off today's episode with Walker Harris, who is North Carolina Central's secret weapon. Oh my God. I'll be honest with y'all. I'm kind of flustered now. I'm trying to regain the composure and see how we're going to attack the whole Angel Jackson being drafted situation. But yeah, this is cool. Let's kick it off with Walker Harris. And I hope that all the Central fans don't jump me. Don't hop in my comments. He's not a secret. Psh, we know that he's good. Psh, you know about Walker Harris? Psh, right? That's my sound effects of me getting punched in the face with every comment that they say. I do know Walker Harris. I know that you know Walker Harris. And don't allow secret weapon to make me think that he's going to surprise you. I know that. But take a step back as you're affirming your belief in Harris. And A, realize I'm not questioning that belief. If anything, I'm actually standing with you and elevating it too. But then B, I don't think that people outside of Durham are familiar at all with Walker Harris. Not only are they not as familiar as you are, they probably don't know them and know him. And one of the reasons is he's been backing up one of the greatest quarterbacks in your school history. And I phrase it like that for a couple of reasons. One, all attention was rightfully on Davius Richard. Who else would you be looking at? Like, let's just be real about it. Davius Richard is your starting quarterback. There is no reason to look elsewhere. There's no reason to even question about a quarterback. When you have spring practice, nobody cares who else is taking the reps because you have Davius Richard. These are storylines that haven't mattered for a couple of years. Walker Harris, to the national fan, has had no reason to really be a talking point. And that's not anything wrong with it, but Davius Richard is the guy. I'm just saying that to say for everybody else, they could sneak up on him, or he could sneak up on them, excuse me. And then also I say that because Davius Richard being a legend for everybody on the national, now I'm talking to everybody else, don't underestimate Walker Harris because he's been a backup for 3 years. He's been a backup to Davius Richard. We wouldn't question somebody who was a backup to Lamar Jackson. because we understand that Lamar Jackson is great. And just because you couldn't beat out Lamar does not mean that you're a bad quarterback. It also doesn't mean that you're great. You don't have to take Central fans' word for it or anything, but let's not write him off. And I'm believing in it because I've seen him just a little bit against Mississippi Valley State. And in that game, he threw for 263 and 5 touchdowns. I've heard Trey Oliver speak about him prior to the game, and there was a level of belief. For you to have a quarterback of Davius Richards' caliber, and for Coach Oliver to say a 1A, 1B type of deal, even though it's a clear Davius Richards is the starter, no kind of controversy or anything of that, for you to even say something like, we view Walker Harris as a starter too, and I think he might have called him a 1B, right? Just to emphasize how good of a quarterback that Harris is. For you to say something like that with Richard on your roster, that speaks volumes to me, right? And then when you come out in the spring and he says, hey, I think that people are going to realize just how good of a player that Walker Harris is, you continue this. Everything that I've heard about Walker Harris from a guy who I don't think is going to give me lip service. Yes, every coach is going to have coach speak and everything, but I do not believe that Trey Oliver is giving lip service to Walker Harris just because. I really don't. This is genuine if you ask me. Now, the reason he needs to be a secret weapon or a weapon in general is because I mean, you're losing a lot. Your quarterback needs to be solid. And if your quarterback can be solid, if I can even get 3/4 of the way that Trey Oliver speaks about Walker Harris, if I can get Harris to be 3/4 of that, oh, we dealing with something crazy right now. I'm not saying it's another Davius Richard. I'm not saying he's going to have a year just like Davius Richard did in 2022. I wouldn't say that at all, but I would say having a quarterback who performs the way that they talk about him will allow that offense to push forward. That's what I will say in a very, very successful manner. So it seems like he had on-target passes, on-time passes. You know he has comprehension of the offense. The learning curve won't be learning the offense. The learning curve will be, how do I lead these men as their starting quarterback now? The learning curve will be, how do I play in real game action on a weekly basis? How do I play when people are beginning to game plan for me? Because right now, they'll probably build some sort of a game plan based off of what he did against Mississippi Valley State. But I don't know if that's a true game plan of what he'll look like in his year starting. But by week 5, people are going to have a way they think about defending him. And somebody's going to figure some things out. You're going to have to go to plan B, plan C, plan D. So when you have to go through all of these, is Walker Harris going to be able to play up to his potential, play up to his talent? These are things that we have to look at, and these are things that I'm really curious about. So this is going to be the fun part. And then I would say swipe, but it's really all HBCU on the D1 level, right? All FCS HBCUs, the quarterback situation is not solid. It's not great. It's a lot of unknowns. And Walker Harris feels like one of the stronger unknowns in that landscape. That, I think, is the best way that I can put Walker Harris in this conversation without predicting what he'll be. So, also, in addition to that, sound like the defensive backs played very well. Sounds like the defense had some things going for them. And you don't have a quick fix like quarterback on that side of the ball, even a premier position like defensive end. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. But when you have that secondary playing up to a certain talent level, when they lost a couple of big time players in that unit, that gives me a big breath of confidence, right? It gives me a strong vote of confidence that this defense can be able to achieve some things in 2024, because you can't just have Walker Harris, even if he is a really good player. You're going to need to have weapons for him to throw to, a running game around him, a defense around him, because you don't want to ask a first-year starter to be everything that you need in order to succeed. You don't want to ask him to be that. Give that man some help, even if we do believe in him as a talent. That being said, Walker Harris, you may not know him if you're outside of Durham, right? Let's just put it like this. Let's summarize it here. If you're outside of Durham, if you're not a North Carolina Central fan, you may not know about Walker Harris. But if you know a North Carolina Central fan, ask them about Brother Harris. And let's see how they speak about him. Because if he's anything like that, the MEAC and the HBCUs all around the country Need to be on lookout. Now, as we push forward, I'm looking out for HBCU Gymnastics, Morgan Price, Kyrstin Johnson. These women went out and they absolutely dominated on a national stage. So let's break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. How many people put some money down on Angel Jackson being selected in the WNBA draft? If you're able to do that, then you won some money, right? And you know what? If you're new to FanDuel, regardless of if she was picked or not, you still would have got $150 back in bonus bets. Because now, if you're new to FanDuel, win or lose, you put down a bet, you'll get $150 back in bonus bets. So go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Now that the WNBA draft is over, the play-in starts tonight. The NFL draft is only a week away. You're looking at the NBA playoffs after this play-in tournament. It's time for you to make a little bit of money. I'm not telling you to do it, but I'm strongly suggesting that you should. So go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That is FanDuel.com/locked on. And remember, if you're new to FanDuel, put down a $5 bet of any kind and you'll get $150 back in bonus bets. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monopoly Go, and I've been told that I'm a competitive person. I try to deny it. I do. But I've been told that I can be competitive at times, and when I get competitive, I ain't playing around. So, yeah, let's say I chime in or I lean into my competitive side, as we all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. My friend put me on to this a while ago, and I asked him, man, why do you like it? And he talked about playing with friends, playing with family, and that was sweet, but I wasn't going for any of that. I was trying to dominate, right? Because I get the easy part about Monopoly Go, and I get to be able to say, hey, yeah, let me play this game. Let me do the regular things that Monopoly typically does. But at the same time, there's a twist. So you can land on my property and I can say, hey, let me get that money, or I can go in and I can rob you. I said, what? I can rob in Monopoly? This ain't the Monopoly I see. This is Monopoly on Go. So I say go ahead and download Monopoly Go at whatever your app store is. We'll continue to talk about this as the week goes on, and let me know your personal experience with the game. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out the Locked On NFL Mock Draft, because streaming on April 17th at 6 p.m. Central, you're on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel, or the Amazon Fire TV channel, by the way. You'll have the local experts breaking down who they would pick for their team. I love the national guys. I watch them all the time, but you're getting local insight from the people closest to the team on who they would pick when they're on the clock. Now, as we continue rolling, Morgan Price, Kyrstin Johnson, these women went absolutely ballistic at the USA Gymnastics Collegiate National Champions, right? It's important to remember HBCU gymnastics is still very fresh. There's only 2 HBCUs in the nation that actually offer this program: Talladega College, Fisk University. And neither one of these programs have been around for 3 years yet. And in this short amount of time, at this weekend's USA Gymnastics Collegiate National Championships, both of these schools walked away with at least 1 gold medal. And I'm looking at Kyrstin Johnson, who was able to win gold in the vault, and I'm looking at Morgan Price, who was able to win gold in the all-around. This is always viewed as a perfect marriage. This is something that when it was first announced, HBCU Gymnastics, oh, that's phenomenal. And we thought it was a high ceiling, but I don't know if anybody thought that they would be able to reach these heights this quickly. And I think that's what makes this so special, because in the infancy, right? Because this is Talladega just had it. This is their first year. Fisk University 2 years ago. This is a very new initiative. And in its newness, so to speak, right? Put some air quotes, newness. I don't think that's a word, but in the new nature of it, you've already reached a high level of success. And you know what? I'm going to say this. Morgan Price clearly, Oh, also, I didn't even say this. In addition to being gold in the vault, you also had Kyrstin Johnson, who had silver in the floor. And then you also had her get bronze in the all around. So she stood on that podium 3 different times. You have Morgan Price, who clearly performed well in the all around because she won gold. So she did everything very well, which is the name of the game when you're trying to win that event. Her lowest score of the day in that, it's 4 events, right? You got the uneven bars, you have the balance beam, you have the floor exercise, and then you also have the, why am I catching a brain fart right now? Oh, the balance beam, right? So you have those 4 events. And for her best events got her a 9.85, and that was the floor, and it was also the uneven bars. And then you have on her lowest event was a 9.725 in the balance beam. So that's about the bar of how low you could go and still be able to get first place, because second place, their lowest score was also a 9.725. And then in total, you had Price, who walked away with a 39.225 final score to come in first place. And this was big because she's the first HBCU national champion, and this was first. So yes, you had Johnson, who was able to win gold in the vault afterwards, but that was not the first story that you see. The first story that you saw was Morgan Price. And there's a lot of things that go into it that will tie in a little bit, because I think her status does play a big part in how we speak about, or when we speak about her, right? But you look at Kyrstin Johnson, and she had herself a day too. Morgan Price was able to win the all around. She got gold, and she had a phenomenal start. And then in the weekend, when it came to individual events, that's when you really saw Kyrstin Johnson come alive. But even in saying that, I feel like I'm slighting her, because you're looking at an athlete who was just a step away from really winning gold in the all around. Had Johnson just performed better on the uneven bars, that's it. Has she just performed better on the uneven bars by a little bit, she is your gold medal winner. Like that's not even a question, because in the top three, she had the best in all of the other 3 events. And then in the uneven bars, unfortunately, she got in a 9.4 range, which dropped her down. And that was just too much. You can't have a 9.4. If she would have had a low of a 9.7, similar to how Morgan Price did, we're having a completely different conversation. But still, you're looking at a really good day. And she's only a freshman. This is her first time here, and she's doing this. So now once she gets past the all around, then she gets to the vault. Then she gets to second in the floor. So she gets gold in one event, silver in another event. She I think she was top 10 in another event after that. She had a really good weekend of action. And for her as a freshman to be able to be the vault champion at USA Gymnastics National Collegiate Championship, right? This is national. Everybody's there. You have multiple people there. I don't want to say everybody's there, but you have a lot of people there. For her to be able to do that, I think spoke a lot of volumes. And I thought it was very successful. Now, these are, and I want to make sure she gets that love, because I'm not seeing Johnson get the love that Price is getting. And I think they deserve to have the same amount of love. Ain't no competing or anything. I just want them both to achieve or receive, rather, the praise that they both deserve. Now, for both of these athletes, they're extremely important to their college, right? So with Price, I think that and it's cut and dry with her, I think that Price really legitimized the HBCU gymnastic movement, because yes, we were already going to see this partnership happen. Everybody already had a high ceiling for it, because there was a belief that Black girls were going to want to go to HBCUs to do gymnastics. Makes sense, right? The fanfare of gymnastics, the fanfare of HBCU culture. I could just see it. And when you see Morgan Price do her floor routine, you see a flair that, people do it, but I think is really befitting of an HBCU. So when you see that pairing, it just makes sense. But then when you have somebody like Morgan Price, who was a big deal coming out of high school, and she came in as a freshman. So at this time, she was still a big deal. She was committed to Arkansas and said, you know what? No, I'm going to go to Fisk, who has never had a gymnastics meet in their life. I think they had just hired a coach. They were going into their first season as a program. That is a huge risk as a big-time recruit. And yet and still, Morgan Price did it. So she kind of legitimized the HBCU movement when you're speaking about gymnastics, in my opinion. And then when you have Johnson at Talladega, she is Talladega College Gymnastics. She was the first ever recruit. Did she start the program? No. Right? Like she didn't actually say, hey, let's do gymnastics at Talladega. She didn't actually pass it through. No, she didn't do that. But she did start this. She kickstart this program. She is Talladega College Gymnastics as their first recruit. And then in her freshman year, to be able to stand on the podium, right? Let's just get that in there. In her first year, her first trip to USA Gymnastics Collegiate National Championships, Kyrstin Johnson, a freshman, was able to stand on the podium 3 different times. She received a gold, she received a silver, and she received a bronze. This is a phenomenal performance. And I think it's one that's a little bit understated, doesn't get the headlines, but when I tell you, it deserves it. Okay. Now, as we push forward, something else that deserves the headlines is Angel Jackson, the former Jackson State big who just got picked by the Washington Mystics. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see where this goes. Let's kind of recap this impromptu decision as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn, and LinkedIn Jobs is the #1 place for all of your small business needs. If you need somebody in the HR department, you need somebody in payroll, you need somebody at cashier, whatever it may be, you need somebody to answer the phones, all of those things you can achieve. You can find people to fill that void on linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. It's really that simple. If you're not doing that, and you're a small business owner, I must question what your intentions are, because I don't think your intentions are to maximize your business. So go ahead and go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. 86% of businesses that follow my instructions have found their candidate in the first 24 hours. It's not my instructions, but you get what I'm saying. You go to LinkedIn and you'll be able to be a part of that success rate and maybe even bump it up to an A. So go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Oh my gosh. Angel Jackson just got selected by the Washington Mystics in the last pick of the WNBA draft. Now I had my TV on because I wanted to see what was going to happen. But when it got down to the last pick, I said, man, I can start my recording. And as soon as I press record, I see Angel Jackson's face pop up. And I said, oh my God, whatever I said, you see it. It's the first thing you see. I'm not cutting that. I'm not cutting that at all. There was no mess ups before. I said that. I saw it, and it was one take. I said, I got to make sure that I get this cold open right so that y'all can see my immediate reaction to Angel Jackson being picked up in the last pick of the WNBA draft. And she was selected by the Washington Mystics. And I'm trying to look up who their draft picks were right now. Let's see. Allow me to punch in real quick. Jackson was drafted by the Aces, not the Mystics. So I guess it's good we're getting off of this now. I didn't know this until I got off. I hopped on Twitter immediately or whatever, and I thought I saw the Mystics, but you got to understand my TV is not really right in front of me. It's kind of to an angle, and if you see it in the opening, I'm clearly, like I wasn't really paying attention, but I thought it said the Mystics. I thought that's what I saw. But she was drafted by the Aces, still picked 36 and all of those things, but I just wanted to clarify it is not the Mystics that drafted her. So we can drop that Aaliyah Edwards stuff and whatnot. She was drafted by the Las Vegas Aces. So if she's able to retain, she'll be going back to the back-to-back WNBA champions. Angel Jackson is the second HBCU player to be picked in 3 years. Prior to Amisha Williams-Holiday in 2022, there was a 20-year drought. This can't be understated, and I understand. Williams Holiday didn't play a game in the WNBA, and it can really be cutthroat. Those drafts are not like the NBA draft, and it's just not, right? Because there's less teams, and maybe it's similar in the first round versus second round, but it can be very difficult. But you have to understand what we're dealing with here. It's been a 20-year drought. A 20-year drought of HBCU players being picked. And now you have 2 in the last 3 years. You can't tell me that the tides aren't turning. You can't convince me of that right now. Did I think that Angel Jackson was going to be selected? No, I didn't. I just didn't feel like her resume was the same as Amisha Williams Holiday. And it was less than Holiday's resume, but it was also a lower selection. So that kind of makes sense. You have Jackson, who had back-to-back Defensive Players of the Year in the SWAC. You have Jackson, who in their one game in the NCAA tournament went against her now teammate, Aaliyah Edwards, and she performed well in the paint. You have Angel Jackson, who comes over from USC and has some Pac-12 footage to her name. I think all of these things can't be understated. All of these things play a part. And then what HBCU did she go to? She went to Jackson State, that has Tamika Reed, who is a clearly respected coach. I don't think that's even up for debate. This is a clearly respected coach in Tamika Reed. In addition to that, you're also looking at Jackson State as a squad who has made it up to the NCAA tournament as a 14 seed twice. Jackson was only a part of one of those teams, but when we're speaking about programs and the respect that they garner, it doesn't matter if it was while you were there, it's recent memory. These things play a part. People don't want to go somewhere where they feel like it's just competition level. And with Jackson State, I don't think that they have that stigma on them as much as their peers do, right? Like if Alabama A&M, no disrespect, they was just the first school that popped in my mind, probably because we've been talking about them a long time with Don Thornton. But if Alabama A&M is successful, you may hear some competition level things. If Jackson State is successful, you'll hear this is what Jackson State does. The reputation of a program can't be understated. Jackson is a phenomenal, Angel Jackson is a phenomenal shot blocker. She increased that this year. And she also increased her steals this year. She's just a really good defensive player. And if you can hone in on that, I think that there's a role for her immediately, because defense, I would assume, is something that translates a little bit easier than offense, because you have the technique and scoring isn't as easy when you get to the professional ranks. I don't know what defense is like, but I think that you could probably translate that better. I'm very excited. I wanted to make sure that I gave this to you immediately. I didn't want to wait a day. I didn't want to record right now, and then all of a sudden Angel Jackson is picked, and now you have to wait until Thursday morning or Wednesday morning. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give this to you immediately Wednesday morning. So sorry, FAMU. You and your head coaching odds can wait. No, I didn't want to change the graphic. It is what it is. So that's what we'll be looking at either on tomorrow or the day after that. I know tomorrow we'll be looking at the transfer portal. It's just about what else accompanies it. I'm excited. This caught me off guard, but I'm very excited to do that. And hopefully you enjoyed this quick breakdown of Angel Jackson to the Washington Mystics. Now, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.